was the mark of betrayal. The scent hit Sarah first, honeysuckle and vanilla, foreign and cloying, wrapped around Marcus's familiar pine and cedar like a serpent. Her bare feet froze on the cold hardwood of their cabin floor as the sounds from their bedroom carved through her chest like silver claws. Breathless gasps, the rhythmic creak of their bed. A woman's voice, definitely not her own, crying out Marcus's name in ecstasy. The wildflowers she'd gathered during her evening walk scattered from her trembling fingers, their delicate petals bruising against the floor like her heart against her ribs. Each petal seemed to whisper accusations, fool, 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 as they settled into the spaces between the floorboards, where her dreams were now dying. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her throat, fingers tracing the raised moon and star pattern of Marcus's mating mark that had been burned into her skin 3 months ago. The mark that was supposed to bind them eternally. The mark that apparently meant nothing. The bedroom door stood ajar, golden lamplight spilling through the crack like liquid mockery. Her wolf whimpered deep in her chest, the sound barely audible even to her own supernatural hearing. She should leave. She should run. Instead, her feet carried her forward, drawn by the same morbid fascination that makes people stare at car accidents. Through the gap, she saw them. Marcus, her Marcus, his powerful frame moving over a woman with flowing auburn hair and porcelain skin. The woman's legs wrapped around his waist, her perfectly manicured nails raking down his back, leaving trails that would heal within minutes thanks to his werewolf constitution. Trails that Sarah's gentle touches had never dared to make. The floorboard beneath her foot groaned. Marcus's head snapped up, his dark eyes meeting hers through the crack in the door. For a heartbeat, she saw something flicker across his face, guilt, perhaps, or shame. Then his expression hardened into cold stone. Sarah. Her name fell from his lips like a curse. The auburn-haired woman, Jessica from the neighboring pack, Sarah realized with fresh devastation, peeked over Marcus's shoulder with a satisfied smile that made Sarah's stomach churn. Sarah's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. I brought you flowers. The absurdity of the statement hung in the air like smoke. Marcus disentangled himself from Jessica with deliberate slowness, not bothering to cover himself as he stalked toward the door. His naked body, once her sanctuary, now seemed like a weapon pointed at her heart. He yanked the door open, and Sarah stumbled backward. 3 months, she whispered, searching his face for any trace of the man who had whispered promises under the full moon. We've been mated for 3 months. 3 months too long. His voice was granite, unyielding. This was a mistake, Sarah. You were a mistake. The words hit her like physical blows. Her hand flew to her throat again, clutching the mark that suddenly felt like it was burning all over again. Marcus, please, we can work through this. I can change, I can— There is no we. He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of Jessica still clinging to his skin. I reject you, Sarah Moonweaver. I reject our bond. The formal rejection sent shockwaves through her very soul. Her knees buckled, but she forced herself to remain standing even as her world crumbled around her. No, she breathed. You can't. The ceremony, the pack witnesses. Watch me. Marcus disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a vial of wolfsbane extract. The liquid glowed an ominous green in the lamplight, and Sarah's wolf howled in terror. Marcus, no, please. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she backed against the wall. You'll leave a scar. The pain— Good. Maybe then you'll remember to stay away from me. He lunged forward, his hand fisting in her dark hair to hold her still. The wolfsbane burned like liquid fire as it met her mating mark, eating away at the sacred bond that connected their souls. Sarah's scream shattered the night, a sound of such pure anguish that every wolf within a mile radius would feel it in their bones. The mark dissolved under the poison, taking with it every dream, every whispered endearment, every promise of forever. Raw, blistered skin remained where once their love had been branded into her very being. Through the haze of agony, Sarah felt something else. A flutter in her lower abdomen, so faint she'd been attributing it to nerves. Oh, goddess, the timing, the nausea, the exhaustion she'd been feeling. She was pregnant. Marcus released her hair, and she crumpled to the floor. He stood over her, his expression merciless. Pack your things. Be gone by sunrise. As consciousness faded at the edges, Sarah clutched her belly and whispered to the child that would never know its father. It's just you and me now, little one. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Jessica watching from the bedroom doorway, victory gleaming in her amber eyes, like fool's gold in the lamplight. Eyes of the Alpha King. The forest grew darker as Sarah stumbled deeper into unfamiliar territory, her bare feet bleeding against the unforgiving ground of fallen pine needles and jagged stones. Ancient oaks towered overhead like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches weaving together to form a canopy so thick that only fragments of moonlight pierced through, casting eerie shadows that danced and shifted with each labored breath she took. The air itself felt different here, heavier, charged with an otherworldly energy that made her wolf whimper and press closer to the surface of her consciousness, seeking protection she could no longer provide. This wasn't just any territory. Even through her exhaustion and pain, she could sense the raw power that saturated every inch of this land, seeping up from the earth itself and humming through the towering pines that seemed to whisper warnings in a language older than memory. The scent markers were unlike anything she'd encountered. Not the simple territorial claims of ordinary pack wolves, but something infinitely more complex and dangerous, layered with authority that made her knees weak and her heart race with primal recognition. Her hand instinctively moved to cradle her barely visible bump, the precious life growing within her that had cost her everything, yet somehow made every sacrifice worthwhile. The burned flesh where Marcus's mark had been seared away throbbed with each heartbeat, a constant reminder of her mate's ultimate rejection and the price of choosing her unborn child over the bond that had once defined her entire existence. Just a little further, she told herself, though she had no destination in mind beyond away from Marcus, away from his pack, away from the life that had crumbled around her like ash. The baby needs me to be strong. The sound of approaching footsteps made her freeze, her damaged wolf senses finally picking up what should have been obvious minutes ago. Multiple wolves, moving with the fluid coordination of trained warriors, had been tracking her for some time. She turned slowly, knowing she had no fight left in her, no strength to run, nothing but the fierce determination to protect the life she carried. That's when she saw him. He emerged from the shadows like a force of nature made flesh, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat as every instinct she possessed screamed conflicting messages of danger and safety, fear and inexplicable longing. He was massive even in human form, broad shoulders filling out a black shirt that seemed tailored to accommodate the lethal grace with which he moved, dark hair catching the fractured moonlight as predatory eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her soul tremble. But it was those eyes that undid her completely. Amber, like liquid gold, ancient beyond measure, they held depths of pain and power that spoke to something fundamental within her very core. The moment their gazes met, the world tilted on its axis, reality reshaping itself around a connection so immediate and overwhelming that she gasped aloud, her hand flying to her chest where her heart hammered against her ribs. Impossible. The thought whispered through her mind even as every cell in her body seemed to sing with recognition. This can't be happening. Not now. Not like this. Well, well. His voice was velvet over steel, cultured and commanding, with an undercurrent of something that made her knees threaten to buckle. What have we here? A second figure materialized beside him, tall, auburn-haired, watching her with calculating green eyes that missed nothing. She's crossed into our territory, my king. Unmarked refugee by the look of her. King? Sarah's mind reeled. She'd stumbled into the territory of Alpha King Darius Blackthorn himself, the most feared werewolf alive, the immortal ruler whose very name was whispered like a prayer or a curse depending on who spoke it. Darius stepped closer, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air around her, and she watched his expression shift from mild interest to something far more complex and dangerous. His gaze traveled over her disheveled appearance, lingering on the angry burn scar at her throat before dropping to her hand protectively curved over her stomach. Something flickered in those ancient amber depths, recognition perhaps, or remembrance of his own losses from centuries past. "You're with child," he said quietly, and it wasn't a question. There was something almost reverent in his tone, a gentleness that seemed at odds with his fearsome reputation. "Please," Sarah whispered, hating how her voice broke, but unable to stop the words from tumbling out. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just, I need somewhere safe. For my baby." The king studied her for a long moment, and she could see him warring with himself, ancient wounds and newer instincts battling behind those mesmerizing eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "You're safe now," he said simply. "No one will harm you here." And despite every rational thought telling her not to trust the most dangerous predator in their world, Sarah felt herself believing him completely. Fighting the pull. The Blackthorn Royal Fortress loomed against the storm-darkened sky like a predator carved from obsidian and ambition. Sarah pressed her palm against the cool glass of her chamber window, watching lightning fracture the horizon in brilliant silver veins. The room Darius had assigned her occupied the eastern tower, its stone walls softened by tapestries depicting ancient wolf hunts, their golden threads catching the firelight from the massive hearth that dominated one wall. Rich burgundy curtains framed tall windows, and the four-poster bed was draped in midnight blue silk that whispered secrets when the wind stirred through the chambers. Persian rugs in deep jewel tones cushioned her bare feet against the cold stone floors, and the air carried the scent of cedar, old parchment, and something distinctly masculine that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin, something that smelled dangerously like home. But this wasn't home. This was a gilded cage, no matter how beautiful the bars. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. "Come in," Sarah called, not turning from the window. "Your Highness." The voice belonged to Elena, the royal healer, a woman with silver-streaked auburn hair and knowing amber eyes who had examined Sarah upon her arrival. "I've brought your evening medications." Sarah finally turned, one hand instinctively protective over her still flat belly. "I'm not royalty. The Alpha King seems to think otherwise." Elena's lips curved in a knowing smile as she set a small tray on the bedside table. "These will help with the nausea and ensure proper nutrition for the pup." The word pup sent a warm flutter through Sarah's chest, followed immediately by a sharp pang of fear. Would this child be rejected too? Cast aside when they proved inconvenient? "He asked me to prepare these personally," Elena continued, her voice gentle. "He was quite insistent about your care." Sarah's heart stuttered. "He what?" Most alphas wouldn't concern themselves with such details, especially for a pregnant female who isn't their mate. Elena's knowing look made heat creep up Sarah's neck. But then again, Alpha King Darius has never been like most alphas. Before Sarah could respond, another presence filled the doorway, massive, commanding, impossible to ignore. Darius stepped into her chambers without invitation, his dark suit replaced by black leather pants and a deep green shirt that made his eyes look like forest shadows. The sight of him in her private space sent electricity crackling along her nerve endings. "Elena." His voice was a rumble of authority. "How is she? Strong? Healthy?" The pup is developing well. Elena gathered her supplies with practiced efficiency. Though she needs rest and proper nutrition. Sarah bristled at being discussed like she wasn't present. I'm standing right here. Darius's gaze locked with hers, and the air between them seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that made her skin prickle. I see that. Elena cleared her throat diplomatically. I'll leave you to discuss accommodations. She slipped from the room with the practiced invisibility of someone accustomed to royal dynamics. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and the magnetic pull that seemed to draw them together despite every rational thought screaming warnings. Sarah lifted her chin defiantly, even as her wolf whined for his attention, his touch, his claim. This is temporary, she said, the words sharp as broken glass. Is it? Darius moved closer, each step deliberate, predatory. You have nowhere else to go. I have... What? Marcus made sure of that. His jaw clenched at the name. Your former pack won't take you back. Not after what he did to you. The truth hit like a physical blow, but Sarah refused to show weakness. I don't need a pack. I don't need anyone. You need someone. His voice dropped to a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. Your pup needs someone. Not you. But even as she said it, her body betrayed her, leaning infinitesimally toward his warmth. No? He was close enough now that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell cedar and wild storms on his skin. Then why does your scent spike every time I'm near? Why does your pulse race when I speak your name? Stop. The word came out breathless, desperate. Sarah. The way he said her name was reverent, like a prayer or a promise. His hand lifted toward her face, and she held perfectly still, caught between desire and terror. His fingertips barely brushed her cheek before she jerked away. Don't. Pain flashed across his features, quickly, masked. I won't force anything, but I won't pretend there's nothing between us. There can't be anything between us. Her voice cracked on the words. Why? Because you're afraid? Because I'm broken. The admission tore from her throat, raw and bloody. Because everyone leaves. Everyone hurts what they claim to love. For a long moment he simply looked at her, really looked, seeing past her defenses to the wounded woman beneath. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. Not everyone. Then he was gone, leaving only the scent of storms and the dangerous hope blooming traitorously in her chest. Enemies at the gates. The morning sun cast long shadows across the fortress battlements, but Sarah felt no warmth from its golden rays. The ancient stone beneath her feet seemed to pulse with an ominous energy, as if the very walls could sense the approaching storm. Wind whipped through her hair, carrying with it the scent of distant smoke and something else, something that made her wolf recoil in recognition. The massive fortress stretched out below her, its towering walls carved from black granite that gleamed like obsidian in the light. Gargoyles perched along the parapets, their stone eyes seeming to track movement in the valley below, while iron-reinforced gates stood sentinel against whatever darkness approached. The air itself felt thick with magic, crackling with the power of generations of alpha kings who had ruled from this stronghold. They're coming. Darius's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade through silk. His presence behind her was a wall of controlled fury, heat radiating from his massive frame even in the crisp morning air. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the stone ledge, her knuckles white against the dark granite. In the distance, a dust cloud rose from the forest road, too large, too organized to be anything but an army. Her enhanced vision picked out the glint of weapons, the organized formation of wolves moving with military precision. How many? She whispered, though she dreaded the answer. 50, maybe more. Darius moved to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Your mate doesn't believe in subtlety. The word mate sent a spike of pain through her chest. Marcus had burned that bond away, but the phantom ache remained, a constant reminder of betrayal. "He's not my mate anymore," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He made sure of that. Darius's jaw clenched, the muscle jumping beneath his skin. She could smell his rage, dark, primal, barely contained. "He has no claim on you. Tell him that." Sarah pointed to the approaching force, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Even from this distance, she could feel Marcus's presence, that familiar signature of power that once made her feel safe. Now it only brought dread. A horn sounded from the valley below, deep and resonant, echoing off the fortress walls. The sound seemed to shake the very foundations of the stronghold, and Sarah watched in growing horror as the army arranged itself in battle formation. "There's something else." Darius's voice had gone deadly quiet. "Another force, approaching from the east." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She followed his gaze to see a second dust cloud rising beyond the tree line, this one moving with predatory stealth. "Who?" "Constantine." The name fell from Darius's lips like a curse. "Ancient enemy of my bloodline. If he's here, it's not coincidence." The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind with sickening clarity. The prophecy, the mark, her supposed importance to the supernatural world. "They're working together," she breathed. "Marcus and this Constantine. Or they're both here to claim the same prize." Darius turned to face her fully, his silver eyes burning with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You." Before she could respond, footsteps thundered up the stone stairs. A guard appeared, his face flushed with exertion and fear. "Alpha King, they're demanding an audience. Both armies have sent envoys." "Let them come." Darius's voice carried the authority of centuries, but Sarah caught the tension beneath his words. "War Council chambers, now." The chambers were a testament to power and intimidation. Soaring ceilings supported by massive stone columns, walls lined with weapons from a dozen conquered territories, and a table carved from a single piece of obsidian that reflected the torchlight like trapped souls. The air was thick with the scent of old leather, burning wood, and the metallic tang of ancient battles fought and won. Marcus entered first, and Sarah's wolf immediately went into defensive mode. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of commanding presence that made others step aside. But now she could see the cold calculation in his eyes, the way his gaze swept over her like she was a possession to be reclaimed. "Sarah," his voice was silk over steel, "you look well, considering your circumstances." "What do you want, Marcus?" She was proud that her voice didn't shake, even as her hands clenched at her sides. "What's mine?" His smile was razor sharp. "You carry my heir. That makes you pack property." The lie hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't pregnant, had never been pregnant, but she could see the calculated cruelty in his eyes. He was creating a claim where none existed. "Liar!" Darius's voice filled the chamber with barely leashed violence. Marcus's smile widened. "Prove it." Before anyone could respond, a second figure entered the chamber, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Constantine was pale as winter moonlight, with silver hair and eyes like chips of Arctic ice. Power rolled off him in waves, ancient and corrupt. "Gentlemen," Constantine purred, his accent thick with old-world menace. "And the lovely prize herself. How convenient." Sarah realized with crystal clarity that she was no longer just a rejected mate seeking sanctuary. She was the center of a war that could tear the supernatural world apart, and both sides wanted her blood. Souls laid bare. The fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the rich mahogany walls of Darius's private study. Ancient leather-bound volumes lined towering shelves that stretched toward the vaulted ceiling, their gilt spines catching the amber light like scattered stars. The scent of aged parchment mingled with the smoky sweetness of burning oak, creating an atmosphere both timeless and intimate. Heavy velvet curtains blocked out the midnight darkness beyond tall windows, while Persian rugs in deep burgundy and gold softened the cold stone floor beneath Sarah's bare feet. She stood before the fireplace, her fingers unconsciously tracing the raised scar tissue where Marcus's mark had once branded her neck. The flames painted her skin in warm, honey tones, but she felt cold inside, hollow in a way that even the Alpha King's presence couldn't quite fill. "You're thinking too loudly," Darius murmured from his position in the wingback chair behind her. His voice carried that familiar rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones, settling something restless in her chest. Sarah didn't turn around. "Tomorrow we face whatever's coming for us. Tonight feels like borrowed time." The leather creaked as he rose, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet as he approached. She felt the heat of his body before he even touched her, that supernatural warmth that seemed to emanate from his very soul. "I had a mate once," he said quietly, stopping just behind her. "Centuries ago, before I became what I am now." The admission hit her like a physical blow. Sarah's breath caught, her hand stilling against her throat. She'd wondered, of course. An immortal like Darius didn't reach his age without collecting scars, both visible and hidden. Her name was Elena. His voice carried the weight of old grief, carefully controlled but never fully healed. "She was carrying our child when the hunters found her." Sarah turned then, unable to bear the distance between them, while he laid his soul bare. Darius's face was carved from granite in the firelight, his silver eyes distant with memory and pain. The perfect mask he wore for the world had cracked, revealing the devastation beneath. "They knew exactly how to hurt me," he continued, his jaw tight. "Knew that killing her would destroy me in ways 1,000 battles never could. I found her in the ashes of what had been our home, clutching the blanket she'd been sewing for our baby." Darius. His name escaped her lips like a prayer, full of understanding and shared anguish. "I swore I would never love again, never give anyone that power over me." His eyes found hers, burning with an intensity that stole her breath. "But then you walked into my life, scarred and broken, and so damn brave it brought me to my knees." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. The carefully constructed walls around her heart began to crumble, stone by stone. "My bloodline is cursed," she whispered, offering her own pain in return. "Every woman in my family is destined to love a man who will destroy her. My grandmother died protecting her mate from his own madness. My mother was murdered by the man who claimed to worship her." She pressed her palm flat against her chest, where an ache had lived for as long as she could remember. "There's a prophecy that the last daughter of my line will either break the curse or die trying. Marcus knew. He marked me anyway, thinking he could control what I am, what I'm meant to become." Darius stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "And what are you meant to become?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but I know it scares him, scares everyone who learns the truth about my heritage." "It doesn't scare me." The simple statement, spoken with absolute conviction, shattered something inside her chest. Sarah had spent her entire life being afraid of her own nature, of the power that hummed beneath her skin like caged lightning. To have someone look at her without fear, without calculation, it was more precious than air. "Why?" she breathed. Darius raised his hand, his fingers hovering just above the scarred flesh of her neck where Marcus's mark had been burned away. "Because my soul recognizes yours. Has been waiting for yours, I think, across centuries of loneliness and loss." When his fingertips finally made contact with her skin, Sarah gasped. The touch sent electricity racing through her veins, awakening something primal and ancient. His thumb traced the ridge of scar tissue with infinite gentleness. "He marked you here," Darius murmured, his voice rough with barely contained emotion. "But scars can be beautiful too. They tell the story of survival." His fingers shifted, trailing lower to rest against her pulse point. "This is where I would place mine," he whispered against her ear. "Not to claim you, but to cherish you, to protect what we could build together." Sarah closed her eyes, letting herself imagine a world where love didn't mean destruction, where two broken souls could heal each other instead of causing fresh wounds. "I'm terrified of loving you," she confessed. "Good," he replied, pressing his forehead against hers. "Fear means it matters." Torn apart. The ancient ruins reeked of decay and something far more sinister. Magic so dark it made Sarah's skin crawl the moment consciousness crept back into her battered mind. Crumbling stone pillars stretched toward a starless sky, their surfaces etched with symbols that seemed to writhe and pulse in the flickering torchlight. Moss-covered altars bore stains that could have been rust, but the metallic scent in the air suggested otherwise. The very ground beneath her felt wrong, as if the earth itself had been corrupted by centuries of blood rituals and forbidden ceremonies. "Where am I?" The thought pierced through the fog clouding her mind as she tried to move, only to discover thick iron shackles binding her wrists to a stone slab. The metal burned against her skin, not ordinary iron, but something infused with magic specifically designed to weaken werewolves. Her wolf whimpered deep inside her consciousness, retreating from the pain. "Awake at last, my precious prize." Constantine's voice slithered through the darkness like poisoned honey. He emerged from the shadows between two towering pillars, his pale eyes gleaming with malevolent satisfaction. His dark hair fell in perfect waves despite the chaos of battle, and his elegant clothes remained pristine while hers were torn and bloodied. "I was beginning to worry my men had been too rough during your extraction." The memory crashed back into her like a physical blow. The fortress under siege, Darius leading their warriors against Marcus's army at the eastern border, the sudden breach in their defenses. She remembered fighting, her claws finding flesh and bone, before something sharp had pierced her neck and darkness had claimed her. "You coward," she spat, struggling against the chains that held her spread eagle on the ancient altar. "Attacking while Darius was away, using poison." "Strategy, darling." Constantine circled her like a predator, savoring his captured prey, his fingertips trailing along the edge of the stone platform. "Your precious Alpha King is so predictably noble, always charging into battle himself instead of staying safely behind his walls. It made separating you from him almost disappointingly easy." The casual way he spoke of it, as if she were merely an object to be claimed, sent fury blazing through her veins. But beneath the rage lurked something far worse, a growing dread as she took in her surroundings more clearly. The symbols carved into the altar beneath her back were not random decorations. They formed a pattern, one she recognized from the ancient texts about forced mating bonds. "You're insane if you think you can force a bond," she whispered, her voice hoarse with horror. "The magic required, it would kill us both." Constantine's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh, sweet Sarah, you underestimate what I'm willing to sacrifice for power." He gestured to the ruins around them, and she noticed for the first time the figures standing motionless in the shadows. Witches, their eyes black with dark magic, their lips moving in silent incantations. These ruins have drunk the blood of countless wolves over the centuries. The magic here is strong enough to forge bonds that nature never intended. Darius. His name echoed through her mind like a prayer, and she reached desperately for the connection they shared. But the iron burned against her skin, and the dark magic saturating the air created a barrier she couldn't pierce. She had never felt so alone, so utterly cut off from the man who had become her anchor in the storm of her chaotic life. "He'll come for me," she said with more confidence than she felt. "He'll tear you apart." "I'm counting on it." Constantine's smile was razor sharp. "When he arrives, driven mad by rage and desperation, he'll be vulnerable. The prophecy speaks of great power flowing through you, my dear, but it says nothing about that power needing to remain with him." He leaned closer, his breath cold against her cheek. "Once our bond is complete, once I've carved my mark into your soul, that power will be mine to command." The ritual circle began to glow with sickly green light as the witches raised their voices in an unholy chant. The symbols beneath her back grew warm, then hot, as if the stone itself was awakening after centuries of slumber. Sarah pulled against the chains with desperate strength, feeling her wolf clawing frantically at the magical barriers containing them both. "Hold on," she told herself, fighting back tears of fury and terror. "He'll find me. He has to find me." But even as she clung to that hope, the dark magic pressed closer, and Constantine began speaking words in a language older than memory. The ancient ruins pulsed with malevolent energy, eager to witness the corruption of something pure, and Sarah realized with growing horror that she was running out of time. The wind carried no scent of pine and snow, no hint of her mate's approaching fury, only the stench of dark magic and the promise of unspeakable violation. "Darius," she whispered into the void, praying somehow her anguish would reach him. "Please." The King's Wrath. The ancient blood oath burned across Darius's palm as he carved the ritual symbols deeper into his flesh, crimson drops spattering onto the consecrated ground beneath his feet. The metallic scent of his royal blood mingled with the sulphurous fog that rolled across the cursed wasteland, and he felt the supernatural realm shudder in response to his call. Protocol be damned. Strategy be damned. Every second Sarah remained in Constantine's grasp was another second his soul withered. "My king." Cain's voice carried a tremor of unease as shadows began materializing around them, ancient beings bound by oaths older than memory itself. "Are you certain about summoning them? The price?" "I'll pay any price." The words tore from Darius's throat like gravel, his wolf spirit already clawing at his consciousness, demanding release. Around them the summoned allies took shape, wraith-like hunters with eyes like burning coals, shadow wolves whose forms flickered between corporeal and ethereal, and the Bone Guard, warriors who had served his bloodline for millennia. The air thrummed with otherworldly power, making his teeth ache and his vision blur at the edges. The cursed ruins of Malachar loomed ahead through the perpetual twilight, twisted spires of blackened stone jutting toward a sky that bled purple and gold. Thorned vines thick as a man's torso coiled around crumbling pillars, their surface glistening with a substance that might have been sap or might have been blood. The very ground beneath their feet pulsed like a living thing, and with each step, Darius felt the ancient evil of this place trying to seep into his bones. Sarah. Her name was a prayer, a battle cry, a promise carved into his very essence. He could feel her through their incomplete bond, a distant flutter of terror and pain that made his wolf howl with rage. "Formation!" His command cracked like a whip, and his supernatural army moved as one fluid entity. The shadow wolves melted into the darkness between the ruins, while the Bone Guard raised shields that gleamed with protective runes. The Wraith Hunters simply vanished, becoming one with the malevolent atmosphere. The first wave of Constantine's forces erupted from the ruins like a plague unleashed. Creatures that had once been human shambled forward, their flesh mottled with decay, eyes glowing with borrowed malice. Behind them came things that defied description, amalgamations of shadow and sinew that moved with predatory grace. Darius shifted without conscious thought, his transformation more violent and complete than ever before. His wolf form towered above even his enhanced supernatural army, midnight black fur rippling with power that seemed to bend reality around him. When he opened his massive jaws and roared, the sound shattered stone and sent lesser creatures fleeing into the depths of the ruins. Mine. She is mine. The thought pounded through his consciousness as he tore through the enemy ranks. His claws, longer and sharper than they had ever been, sliced through corrupted flesh like paper. Each kill sent a surge of power through his system, not just physical strength, but something deeper, more primal. Love weaponized into pure destruction. A creature made of writhing shadows launched itself at his throat, and he caught it mid-leap, his jaws clamping down with enough force to crush stone. The thing dissolved with a shriek that tasted of sulfur and despair, but 3 more took its place. Around him, Cain fought in perfect synchronization with the summoned allies, but Darius barely registered their presence. His entire world had narrowed to a single purpose: reach Sarah. The ancient stones beneath his paws cracked and groaned as his weight increased with each surge of power. His wolf spirit was growing, feeding on his desperation and love until he stood nearly 15 feet at the shoulder. The enemy forces began to hesitate, some actually backing away from the apocalyptic fury he had become. "I'm coming, beloved. Hold on." Through the chaos of battle, he caught her scent, jasmine and moonlight tainted with fear and something else, something that made his vision go red. Constantine had hurt her, marked her somehow. The realization sent him into a frenzy that transcended mere rage. He bounded over the heads of still fighting forces, his massive form sailing through the poisoned air toward the central spire where that scent grew stronger. Behind him he heard Cain's startled shout, heard the battle cry of his allies as they fought to keep pace with their king's supernatural charge. The spire's entrance yawned before him like a mouth full of broken teeth, darkness so complete it seemed solid. But within that darkness, he could feel her, his true mate, his other half, the piece of his soul that Constantine had dared to steal. Darius plunged into the shadows without hesitation, his enhanced senses mapping the ancient corridors, even as malevolent whispers tried to burrow into his mind. Each step brought him closer to Sarah, and with each step, his power continued to grow. The Wolf King had awakened something beyond ordinary lycanthrope strength. This was the power of a mate bond forged by destiny itself. "I'm coming, Sarah. Nothing in heaven or hell will stop me." The Luna awakens. The ritual chamber stretched before Sarah like the belly of some ancient beast, its walls carved from obsidian that seemed to drink in the flickering torchlight. Massive stone pillars rose toward a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, each one inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Writhing runes that seemed to move when she wasn't watching, pulsing with malevolent energy that made her teeth ache. The air hung thick with the scent of old blood, and something else, something rotting and sweet that turned her stomach. Chains dangled from iron rings driven deep into the walls, some still bearing rust-brown stains that spoke of countless victims who had come before. At the chamber's heart sat a raised dais of black marble, its surface polished smooth by centuries of use, grooved channels carved into its edges to catch whatever might flow across it. Sarah knelt in the center of it all, silver shackles burning against her wrists and ankles. The metal seared her skin with every breath, every heartbeat, leaving angry red welts that wouldn't heal while the cursed bonds held her. Around the chamber's perimeter stood Constantine's followers, rogues and outcasts drawn to his promise of power, their eyes reflecting torchlight like hungry animals waiting for scraps. "The moon reaches its zenith," Constantine announced, his voice echoing off the ancient stones. He approached the dais with ceremonial slowness, a silver blade gleaming in his grasp. "Soon, you will bear my mark, and my heir will grow strong within you." My heir. The words struck Sarah like physical blows. The life growing inside her, Mikhail's child, kicked as if responding to her surge of rage. This precious gift, this miracle she'd thought lost forever, and Konstantin believed he could simply claim it as his own. "You're insane if you think I'll let you touch my child," she snarled, testing the bonds again. The silver burned deeper, but something else stirred beneath the pain. Something that had been sleeping, waiting. Constantine laughed, the sound grating against her nerves. "Your child? Once you're mated to me, everything you are becomes mine. The babe will know no father but me." The rage built in Sarah's chest like a living thing, hot and fierce and protective. She thought of Mikhail's hands gentle on her belly, his voice soft with wonder as he spoke to their unborn child. She thought of the mark Darius had burned from her skin, trying to erase every trace of love from her life. She thought of all the ways men had tried to control her, claim her, reduce her to nothing more than a vessel for their ambitions. No more. The word rang through her mind with crystalline clarity, and suddenly the moonlight streaming through the chamber's high windows seemed to intensify. It fell across her skin like liquid silver, and where it touched, power stirred. Not the borrowed strength of an alpha's mark, not the reflected glory of a mate's protection, but something that belonged to her and her alone. "I am not a prize to be won," she whispered, and her voice carried despite its softness. The chains at her wrists grew warm, then hot. "I am not a vessel to be claimed." Constantine paused, his eyes narrowing. "What?" "I am Luna." The words erupted from her throat with primal force, and the silver shackles exploded outward in a shower of molten metal and white light. Sarah rose to her feet, power flowing through her veins like fire, like moonlight given form. Her pregnancy hadn't weakened her. It had amplified everything she was, everything she'd always been, but never known how to access. The child within her pulsed with matching strength, Alpha and Luna bloodlines combining into something unprecedented. She turned toward the prisoners chained along the walls, pack members from various territories that Constantine had taken to fuel his rituals. With a gesture, their bonds shattered like glass. "Run," she commanded, her voice carrying alpha authority that brooked no argument. "Get out and don't look back." They fled, but Constantine's followers moved to intercept them. Sarah stepped forward, and the ancient stones beneath her feet cracked with released power. "Your fight is with me," she declared, silver light wreathing her hands like claws. The runes carved into the chamber walls began to smoke and blacken, her Luna essence burning away centuries of dark magic. Constantine raised his blade, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes for the first time. "You cannot fight destiny. You were meant to be mine. The prophecies." "The prophecies never mentioned you," Sarah cut him off, advancing with predatory grace. "They spoke of a Luna who would stand beside the true Alpha King, not beneath him, not as his property." She smiled, and it held all the fierce protection of a mother defending her young. Beside him, as his equal. The moonlight intensified, and Sarah embraced the power singing in her blood. She had spent too long letting others define her strength. No more running, no more hiding. The Luna had awakened. United we rise. The ancient ruins pulsed with otherworldly energy as moonlight cascaded through crumbling archways, transforming the cursed stone into something ethereal and alive. What had once been a place of darkness and decay now shimmered with silver radiance, each weathered column and broken statue bathed in luminescence that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath Sarah's feet. The air itself hummed with power, thick and electric, making her skin tingle as if lightning danced just beneath the surface. Twisted vines that had choked the ruins for centuries now bloomed with midnight flowers, their petals catching the light like scattered diamonds. The scent of jasmine and wild magic filled her lungs, intoxicating and pure, while the wind carried whispers of ancient prophecies finally awakening from their slumber. Sarah stood at Darius's side, her heart hammering against her ribs as she faced Constantine across the transformed battleground. The rogue Alpha's eyes burned with jealous fury, his massive frame trembling with barely contained rage as he witnessed the purification unfolding around them. Behind them, dozens of werewolves from every territory watched in silent reverence, their collective breath held as destiny prepared to unfold. This is it, Sarah thought, her fingers intertwining with Darius's. Everything we fought for comes down to this moment. The scar on her shoulder, the place where Marcus had burned away his mark, throbbed with anticipation, as if sensing what was to come. She could feel Darius's power flowing through their connection, warm and steady, filling the empty spaces in her soul that she hadn't even known existed. You think your pathetic bond can overcome centuries of darkness? Constantine snarled, his voice echoing off the ancient stones. I am the true Alpha King. I will not be denied what is rightfully mine. He launched himself forward with inhuman speed, claws extended and fangs gleaming. But Sarah was ready. She moved in perfect synchronization with Darius, their bodies flowing together like they'd been fighting as one for lifetimes. When Constantine struck, she ducked low while Darius swept high, their combined assault forcing the rogue Alpha back. We don't have to fight, Darius called out, his voice carrying the authority of a true king. The land itself recognizes us. Look around you, Constantine. The curse is breaking. The prophecy is fulfilled. Indeed, with each passing moment, more of the ruins transformed. Cracked foundations sealed themselves with veins of silver light, and dead trees burst into bloom with leaves that glowed like captured starlight. The very air sparkled with magic, responding to the pure love flowing between Sarah and Darius. But Constantine only roared in defiance, his form beginning to shift into his massive wolf. If I cannot rule, then I will destroy everything. The battle erupted in earnest then. Sarah felt her own wolf rise to the surface, power coursing through her veins like molten silver. She had never felt so strong, so complete. Every movement was perfectly choreographed with Darius, as if they shared not just a bond but a single soul split between two bodies. When Constantine lunged at her throat, Darius was there, deflecting the blow. When the rogue Alpha tried to flank Darius, Sarah intercepted him with claws that blazed with ethereal fire. They moved like dancers, like warriors, like the destined mates they were always meant to be. I understand now, Sarah realized as she dodged another vicious swipe. This isn't about defeating him through strength alone. It's about proving that love conquers all darkness. As if reading her thoughts, Darius caught her eyes across the battlefield. In that moment of connection, something extraordinary happened. Light erupted from both of them, pure and blinding, washing over the ruins in waves of cleansing power. Constantine stumbled back, his form flickering between wolf and human as the light touched him. No, he screamed, but his voice was already growing weaker. This cannot be. The assembled werewolves fell to their knees as they witnessed the miracle unfolding. The light continued to spread, reaching beyond the ruins to touch the surrounding forest, healing corruption that had festered for generations. Sarah felt Darius's hand cup her face, his thumb tracing the scar on her shoulder. May I? He whispered, his eyes shining with love and reverence. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes. Make me whole. When his mark settled over her old scar, silver fire blazed across her skin. The sensation was indescribable, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering, like finding the missing piece of her very soul. The light that erupted from the completed bond was so brilliant that even she had to close her eyes. When the radiance finally faded, Constantine was gone, not destroyed, but transformed, cleansed of his corruption and returned to his original pack as an ordinary wolf, his memory of darkness mercifully erased. Alpha King, the werewolves whispered in unison, bowing to Darius. Luna Queen, they added, turning their reverence to Sarah. As Sarah looked out over the purified ruins, Now gleaming like a palace of moonlight and magic, she felt complete for the first time in her life. They had done it. They had fulfilled the prophecy and united not through conquest, but through love. Destiny, at last, was theirs. Forever marked. The first cry pierced the dawn air like a battle horn, triumphant and fierce. Sarah gasped as Dr. Helena placed the squirming bundle against her chest, tiny fists already reaching toward the light streaming through the nursery's crystal windows. The second cry followed moments later, harmonizing with its sibling in a chorus that made every wolf within miles lift their heads in recognition. Two perfect pups, Helena whispered, her weathered hands gentle as she settled the second baby beside the first. A daughter and a son. Sarah's breath caught as she gazed down at their children. Their children. The boy bore Darius's striking silver hair, already thick despite being mere minutes old, while the girl had inherited Sarah's auburn locks that gleamed like copper in the morning sun. But it was the marks that made her heart stop entirely. There, on each tiny shoulder blade, were the intertwined symbols of both royal bloodlines. The ancient moon crest of Darius's line merged seamlessly with the phoenix rising of her own forgotten heritage, the marks glowing faintly with power that thrummed through the room like a living heartbeat. The prophecy, she breathed, tracing the marks with trembling fingers. The twins stirred at her touch, their small bodies radiating warmth that spoke of the extraordinary strength flowing through their veins. Darius moved behind her, his massive frame casting protective shadows over their family. She felt rather than heard his sharp intake of breath as he witnessed the marks for the first time. His hands settled on her shoulders, fingers pressing into the spot where his name was carved permanently into her soul. Not just metaphorically, but as literal silver script that had appeared the night they completed their bond 6 months ago. They will unite everything, he murmured against her hair, his voice rough with emotion. Every territory, every pack, every scattered wolf will recognize their authority. The nursery around them reflected this new unity. Tapestries from the northern mountains hung beside southern desert silks, while eastern forest wood formed cradles carved by western plains artisans. Representatives from every territory had contributed something to this room, each piece a symbol of their willing submission to the Alpha King and his queen. Through the tall windows, Sarah could see the sprawling fortress courtyard where dozens of pack leaders waited for news. The sight still amazed her. Wolves who had been bitter enemies now standing shoulder to shoulder, united under the banner of their reign. Gardens bloomed where battlefields once scarred the earth, and children from different territories played together in spaces that had known only violence before. "Do you remember," Darius said softly, settling beside her on the wide bed, "when you told me love wasn't supposed to hurt?" Sarah smiled, shifting so he could cradle their son while she held their daughter. "You've learned well, my king." "Our kingdom," he corrected, the possessive growl in his voice gentled by tenderness. "You made me remember that strength isn't just about conquest, it's about protection, about building something worth defending." The babies settled into their parents' arms with the contentment of cubs who knew they were safe. Sarah marveled at how perfectly they fit, how her body had known exactly how to create these perfect beings who would reshape their world. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Helena stepped aside as Counselor Marcus entered, his usually stern face bright with joy. "Your Majesties," he said, bowing low. "The representatives are requesting permission to witness the marks. Word is already spreading. The united bloodlines have produced the prophesied heirs." Sarah exchanged a look with Darius. They had expected this moment, prepared for it, but holding their newborns made everything feel more precious and fragile. "Give us an hour," Darius commanded gently. "Then we'll present them properly." Marcus nodded and withdrew, leaving them in peaceful silence once more. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. They had spent months preparing not just for parenthood, but for what their children would represent. The twins would grow up knowing they were bridges between worlds, living symbols of what love could accomplish. With you? Darius leaned over to brush his lips against hers, the kiss tasting of promises and forever. I'm ready for anything. Later, they stood together on the great balcony overlooking their united territories. The twins slept peacefully in their arms, while hundreds of wolves gathered in the courtyard below, their voices raised in celebration. The sun climbed higher, painting the landscape in gold and amber, illuminating a realm finally at peace. Sarah felt the mark on her soul pulse with warmth, Darius's name written in elegant script across her very essence, claiming her as completely as she claimed him. It was a binding that went deeper than skin, deeper than bone, carved into the fundamental fabric of who she was. This is just the beginning, she whispered, watching their people celebrate new hope. Darius's arm tightened around her waist. The best part of our story starts now. As if responding to their parents' words, both babies opened their eyes simultaneously, silver and gold gazing up at the endless sky, ready to inherit a world remade by love.